based on his answer. You suggested that either your decision or there was some decision made that said that Mr. Slagle's map was not constitutional, but yours is. What criteria and who did you consult to make this type of statement to the committee that your map is constitutional and, for example, his was not?
Our legal counsel has so advised you.
Thank you.
Other questions, Representative Lundy?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and do have a question for the witness. I'd like to echo the Vice Chair's thoughts. I'm very concerned about the hyper speed that we're moving at on this, and it's just not good. Our members want to work, Mr. Chairman, and for the sponsor of the bill, we want to work with you in putting together competitive districts. But it doesn't look like that's what we're going to end up here with today. I think it's unfortunate. It's a total disservice to the public to not give them the opportunity to have more time for input. I think it should be noted, we're looking at this for the first time at 2:15 today. We've had probably 5 months to work on this. The hyper-partisanship, this hyper-speed, is just not good for Ohio. Let's get into the specifics, though. And with that point in mind, I guess I'd like to ask the bill sponsor, who also serves as the chairman of this committee, what's the rush? Why so fast?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lundy, there's a number of reasons. First and foremost, as I indicated, I think, in a couple of conversations with some other members of the committee, right now we have a primary that is set for March. We, of course, tried to move it to May, and House Bill 194, that is now in jeopardy. There actually was a proposal and an agreement, as I understood, between Leader Buttigieg and Speaker Batchelder to move forward on legislation 318, which is presented here today, to move that primary to May. Leader Buttigieg has backed out of that deal, as I understand it, as of about 2 hours ago. Now, I don't know what the Senate's going to do, but if we're going to have an election in March, and folks have to pass their file petitions in December, we're not giving people much of a chance to decide on what we're going to do. Now, this isn't 16 or 18 congressional districts, and everybody has the same district, and they're all safe, and they're not going to have opposition. There's going to be some serious political activity, people deciding who to run against, where to run, how long that's going to be, and to simply wait until sometime in the future, which is undesignated, is really unfair to the folks who are running and the people who are there serving. That's the principal problem. You heard testimony today from the Board of Elections officials about how important it is to get this process done. Again, they have to prepare an election. And I think the last thing that we want to do is uncertainty among the population about what's happening with the congressional election. This is a huge change. One of the biggest, if not the biggest, probably percentage-wise, we're losing more congressmen than any other state in the nation. And so these lines, of course, are going to change somewhat dramatically. And so to just let the population hang, I don't think is fair. Now, that's one of the reasons why we started the public process back in July and had those hearings so people could come and testify, and so that members of the committee could also have input. Now, I should also hasten to add that the Democrat members of the Legislative Task Force were allocated funds to bring a map forward, or at least to bring suggestions forward and to study the maps, and I haven't seen anything from the Democratic members of the Legislative Task Force, a map, suggestions, anything about how these should look. So if those aren't all enough reasons, I believe they're important for trying to move this forward for the sake of certainty with the population. I understand you may disagree, and that's where we part ways.
Representative Long.
Just for clarification, I think there's, as I said before, been a willingness to work together, but I think there's also a big disappointment about how this is being raced through, and that's very, very unfortunate here. I wanted to focus in on another component here, and that is when I look at these, just a rough calculation, it looks like we've got 63 county splits compared to last time around we had 44 county splits. How is that going to be producing more positive maps than what we had last time? That looks like we didn't do a good job of drawing the line.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lundy, I understand that is, as I mentioned in my testimony, is one of the redistricting principles that's set out for us in LSC when we began this venture back in July. But as I've indicated, as Senator Sawyer indicated in his comments in his redistricting hearing, those are also in conflict with, or can be in conflict with other principles. Remember first that the constitutional principles and how the Supreme Court has interpreted that is our first guideline. And population equality is the most important, as I indicated in the legal precedents that have been set out, it is paramount, as the Supreme Court has said. Anybody can draw a map that looks nice if they don't abide by the Constitution and they don't follow those population principles. So necessarily, when you go into some counties and you're trying to equalize population, you're still trying to keep communities of interest, keeping some of these other factors in mind, keeping cores of districts together, those kinds of things, you're necessarily going to have some of those divisions. It would be great, years ago, the state of Ohio had one representative from each county. And someone from Paulding County thought that was a great idea. The folks from Cuyahoga County thought it was such a great idea. And we changed that to one man, one vote. And that's what this map reflects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I would just like to point out that, I know that we've had a lot of talk here today about having all public hearings for the maps, but the bottom line is we haven't had public hearings on this map. This is the one that really counts. This is the one that's driving the bus here. And I just think that, I know that my members were willing to work together with you. We're probably willing to stay all through the week, into the weekend, whatever's required to make sure that we can have some reasonable and meaningful public hearings on this map. But we're just doing a great disservice to Ohioans by this hyper-speed, hyper-partisanship activity.
Well, Representative Blessing, if I could just respond, I guess one of the concerns I have with that is we had an agreement with Leader Budish a couple of weeks ago, specifically on one of these bills, and then he backed out of it. And I guess I'm not sure what it is that we can rely on in terms of working together in agreement if something as simple as that can't be followed.
We'll just take more time and we can work with it.
Other questions, Representative Klein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to respond a little bit to that, I think the agreement also did not anticipate that we would have a 3-day window when maps were introduced, and then we had a vote on the floor of the House. So I think that as far as holding up ends of the deal, I think that both parties to that deal, I think that Speaker Batchelder was the first to go back on the deal. A question I have is pretty simple. Who drew this map?
Chairman Blessing, Representative Clyde, this was an effort by Republican staffers taking into account, again, the variety of input that we had from the public and other members of the legislative task force. And again, as you know, the legislative task force has allocated funds, including staff, equipment, and also for legal counsel in order to advise folks on this map. So I assume that, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the effort on the Democrat side, but it's going to be a similar process. I assume that when the Democrat folks were drafting the map, that same kind of thing.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And just You know, I was part of that group traveling around the state to your district as well as to kind of all four corners of the state. And we did, participate actively in those hearings and made many suggestions about an open process, a process where once we actually had a map to consider, that we would have opportunity for meaningful input on the maps, hearings, and a more open process once we have a map. We were very clear with those suggestions. We heard those suggestions from the public everywhere we went. So, I feel it's unfair to say that we've offered no suggestions or input to the process and all of that participation. One question I have is we face a 5 p.m. deadline for any amendments while we're all here in this room listening and seeing the maps for the first time. Can we have the electronic data that goes along with these maps so our staff can work on analyzing the map and at least maybe have some opportunity to provide some meaningful input?
Yeah, I think that data is available, will be made available as soon as possible. I mean, I don't have that in my phone in my pocket. I can't send that out there. But that data is public data. It should be made available to your staff as soon as possible. And, so yes, is the answer to your question.
So before that 5 p.m. deadline for proposing?
Yeah, I guess I would, if I can, I'll just ask members of the staff, the representative, to do that forthwith, as we say in the legal business. Okay? All right, Dave? Good. Okay.
Can I get some clarification? One of the process that's unfolded with the public competition and the many maps that have been submitted by members of the public using objective criteria such as competitiveness and preserving communities of interest. We've just now ended that competition, have the resulting maps, and I want to dig a little bit at your saying that those maps are unconstitutional. I think that that's a pretty strong statement, and if you could explain exactly why those maps are unconstitutional and which map in particular you're referring to, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Clyde, to be clear, I have not said that about the maps that we're discussing today because they haven't been formally submitted to the committee. We will review those, and if I have comments regarding the constitutionality about it, I will go ahead and make those. The comment that I made about constitutionality as regards to the map was in regards to the map that was submitted by Mr. Slagle last week. And that map had two fundamentally flawed constitutional problems. The districts had a range of 7,000 people difference in them, as high as 724,000 and down to 717,000. That's going to be ruled unconstitutional, as I understand the law. The second is the issue regarding the majority-minority district. We believe that under the law and under the test that is set forth, that it is constitutionally required of us to do that. And the majority is 50% plus one. It's not something that's close to 50%. Now, I understand Mr. Slagle agrees with that. He has other folks who disagree with that, or at least argue that it may not be correct. But, again, as I step back and look at this, the last thing that we want, and I'm sure the last thing that you want, is to have a federal court drawing a congressional district rather than the elected representatives of the people of the state of Ohio. So our primary, and by that I mean not only most important, but first, our primary mandate is to comply with the U.S. Constitution and federal law, including the Voting Rights Act.
Representative Clyde.
My understanding is that maps were submitted by the...
I don't mean to, I'm not trying to argue with you. When you asked me why I was commenting on constitutionality, that was specifically with the map that was presented at the last committee hearing last month, or last Tuesday. That's what my comments were about. I have not commented about all of the other maps that have been submitted since then. by Friday, that there may be some maps that someone walks in with today and says, how about these? I haven't commented specifically about those.
And my
But I'd like to hear the
understanding,
testimony first.
sure, and my understanding is that there are maps that have been submitted by the deadline that you set, that have, equal populations. So I think that, those maps hopefully, will be considered as part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr.